All right, Stochastic, here we go. It's your old pal EMac coming to you with Greg Ehrenberg as we talk the final NFL slate of the regular season. It is the Buffalo Bills in Miami taking on the Dolphins. The winner gets the number 2 seed in the AFC East, in the AFC, and is the AFC East champion. Somehow, if Buffalo loses, though, Jacksonville lost, didn't they? So Buffalo should still be in the playoffs. I think that was their only out. Miami can either be the 2nd seed or the 6th seed going to Cincinnati. But we at least have the 2nd seed on the line, which will be home field advantage up until the AFC Championship. And then depending on who makes it, they could still hold the home field advantage. Greg, what a day. I see you're trolling all of your favorite Philadelphia Eagles fans. I will not financially recover from playing A.J. Brown in my main lineup on all 3 sites today. So how you been?
Yeah, doing good. So if there was a little more foresight, I would have been wearing this like beanie when I was doing a show with Lofty or with Mike producing, but it's really just as cold as balls outside in New Jersey. And this is the warmest thing I had to put on because the windows in my office are a little bit drafty and it's at night and I just wanted to be not freezing my ass off during the show. So that's it. That's the only reason I picked this. But yeah, it is also nice that maybe some good positive juju for us because the Giants did just beat an Eagles team in a fairly one-sided game that the Eagles actually needed to win and the Giants were trying to be tanking.
I still can't. I told you I was on work calls and such all day, so I missed everything. I got to be excited because the Seahawks somehow survived a missed field goal, but I see they didn't get the help they needed to make it into the playoffs. You mentioned the Eagles. I saw that A.J. Brown ended up with minus 0.6 on most of the sites where I played him. That wasn't helpful. Kenneth Gainwell didn't quite really do as much as we were hoping for here. And then Marcus Mariota came in. So I'm assuming they were just looking to protect Hurts, or Philly's still in the playoffs still. So were they just looking to protect Hurts? Is that the main thing? Interesting. But yeah, Marcus Mariota.
He got hurt.
Oh, Jalen Hurts got hurt.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts got hurt during the game.
Oh, that was something I was not paying attention to. Wow. So there was a lot of moving parts here today. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So A.J. Brown got hurt. Jalen Hurts got hurt. So there was a whole bunch that was going on that Eagles game. A lot of teams had players injured when they probably should have been a little bit more risk adverse. So like the Detroit Lions, who had nothing to gain at all, they lost Laporta today. Amon-Ra St. Brown briefly got hurt, but then ended up coming back. So yeah.
I thought that Detroit was like all but assuredly locked into their seed. Interesting.
They were.
Okay, well, here you go. None of these were quite as egregious as Brandon Staley when they literally couldn't move up or down with the Chargers, and he had Mike Williams got dinged up last year or 2 years ago. But anyway, we have one more game to go tonight, and we've got a lot of injured players here. We have a couple. I don't know that a surprise inactive is the case, but Latavius Murray is not active. So that means that the running backs will be James Cook, Ty Johnson, and Leonard Fournette. That is kind of exciting. We have Uncle Lenny in there. Miami, of course, is going without Raheem Mostert for the 2nd week. They're without Jalen Waddle for the 2nd week. And then Xavier Howard out as well. And I think a couple linebackers on their defensive side. So there's a lot of back and forth in this one. We want to remember that Miami usually has a distinct home field advantage in day games because the opposing team has to stand and sit on the sidelines of the sunny side of the field. That doesn't happen tonight. So that's factored into everything, but just a reminder that is something that they have. But looks like we might have a game with a lot on the line tonight. Greg, should be a fun one.
Yeah. We're going to have the Dolphins and the Bills playing for the AFC East. I've already got lineups run here in the Sims for both FanDuel and DraftKings. So whatever questions you guys have for us, if you're in Discord, one of the perks being a Stochastic member, you could always ask us questions over the course of shows, and we'll be answering them on the show. But also, if you guys want to leave us super chats, or if you're just in YouTube and we see stuff that comes up pretty regularly as questions, we'll hit on that as well. But then, also like the video and subscribe. And sponsored by Owner's Box today. So EMac, the Owner's Box, people, if you haven't checked it out yet, there's been a good amount of overlay over to Owner's Box over the course of the year. So if you aren't taking advantage of that, you should sign up at Owner's Box. Use the link below. You're getting up to a $500 bonus on your first deposit there. So EMac, Owner's Box, if people have questions about that, we could touch on that as well. Are you bummed about your Seahawks not making the playoffs?
I'm actually very sad. It would have been great 2 years in a row where Russell Wilson did not make the playoffs and the Seahawks did, but it was sort of like house money last year. And they 9-8. I mean, I wish they made the playoffs, but I will never complain because of the year the Seahawks did make it at 7-9. That was the Beastquake year. So I can't, you know what? Sometimes a 9-8 team is not going to make the playoffs. That's okay. But here we go. So shall we run down? You want to go by team first or by position? Which is your favorite?
So one thing that
I'm analyzing just in case you thought I was trying to grab the wheel there, since this is on-air production meeting here.
Yeah, so one thing that I would like to do here is we could look at the top projected lineups for FanDuel and DraftKings to start, because I know a lot of people just want to see what some of the lineups are. So we'll look at what the Sims are giving us for top lineups on FanDuel as well as for DraftKings. We'll see what that looks like. And then after that, Neil, I did the same exact thing as you. You kept calling me Adam the other day, so now I called you Neil this time. So
I think you planned that.
Now we are even. So here's what we'll do. We'll look at some of the top lineups here. We'll see what it looks like. And then we'll start to break down some of the positions in the quarterbacks. But starting with the top overall ROI lineup that we have in here for FanDuel, it does have Josh Allen at the MVP spot with Tyreek Hill, Trent Sherfield, Khalil Shakur, and Tua as the other flex option. So both quarterbacks are in our top projected FanDuel lineup. So do you have any issues with that, EMac? This is a very heavy stars and scrubs lineup. We've got Josh Allen in the MVP spot. We've got Tua in the flex. And then we've also got Tyreek Hill in there. So we've got two punt plays in Shakur and Trent Sherfield. Do you think this is a pretty good slate to be going stars and scrubs builds?
I think we're going to be forced into stars and scrubs builds just because there are so many options. You've got both Wilson Juniors there for Miami. Durham Smythe, not a super cheapie, but still discounted. You mentioned Sherfield there. I would not want to get to Deontay Harty. He's another cheapie guy. And then obviously Leonard Fournette, a cheapie. So I think it is just by default going to be stars and scrubs. And there's a lot of stars on this one. If you look at the very top, there's I would say that definitely Josh Allen is a multi-touchdown option. Tyreek Hill, of course, probably Achane, and then I guess you could say maybe Gabe Davis is, just because he's been there for past history. But that's a lot. Like four of those guys, not Davis, but put in Tua. I would expect multiple touchdowns from those. It's set up to be a stars and scrubs game.
All right. And then if we go ahead and look at the DraftKings side of things, the top overall DraftKings lineup in our Sims, quite different looking because it does have a defense in it here, EMac. We've got a defense in our top projected Sim ROI lineup on DK. It is a 4-2 Buffalo stack. And then we've got Tyreek Hill is still the captain in this lineup. Then we've got the Bills defense, Dalton Kincaid, and the Dolphins defense, James Cook, Josh Allen. So a double defense lineup, which you have to figure is not going to be all that popular for tonight's slate, EMac. Who's playing the defenses today? But considering that is a lineup that is showing up here, at least this one particular lineup towards the top of the simulated ROI, which I think is primarily going to be due to contrarian purposes. What do you make of the defenses being in this top lineup?
I'm surprised both are. I actually think the Buffalo defense is in a decent spot, even though they are on the road. And that was one that I felt would somewhat go overlooked by gamers, just because there are so many people at the top and you start thinking about offenses. But a couple sacks, a couple picks, a scoop and score, a pick six, there's a variety of ways for them to get on the board. And I think the Buffalo does not surprise me that it's there. Miami surprises me that it's there. They have not had the best season. I mean, obviously they just gave up 56 points to Baltimore. They've had 11 sacks in their last 3 games, just 2 interceptions and 4 fumbles. And in that same time frame, Allen has been sacked 3 times. So in his 3 games, he's been sacked 3 times and he's thrown 2 interceptions. So I'm surprised to see the Miami defense there, plus without Howard and a couple, one of their rotational defensive linemen and 2 of their linebackers. That's a bit of a surprise.
Yeah. So one thing that I do think about the Dolphins defense that kind of makes them sneaky for tonight is how many turnovers does Josh Allen have this year, EMac? And I think that is something to consider as a potential way to get maybe some upside out of the Dolphins defense here. I'm actually going to favorite the top 150 lineups here for DK and then go ahead and look at what the Dolphins defense exposure ended up being. We did get them into 18% of our top 150 lineups here. And if we go ahead and look up, let's see, how many total turnovers does Josh Allen have this year? If I'm not mistaken, it's a fairly lofty number. He might even lead the NFL in turnovers. That is going to create some upside in the Dolphins defense. It's very high variance, obviously, because sometimes Josh Allen shows up and he looks like an MVP candidate. Other days he shows up and he looks terrible. So Josh Allen this year has thrown 16 interceptions, and he has also fumbled the ball. Let's see, what has he lost? Like another 7 fumbles or something like that. So it's been a lot of turnovers this year for Josh Allen. So that in itself, I think, does make the Dolphins not a safe play by any means, but definitely one to consider in tournaments, considering the turnover proneness of Josh Allen. But let's go ahead and look at these quarterbacks, and we could talk about a DraftKings, FanDuel. We'll separate them, but at least for the purposes of the quarterbacks, I think it's going to be fairly similar for the two of them. Do you have a preference amongst the two QBs?
Yes, it is going to be Josh Allen. And sorry, I was trying to open that page, but that's a little too much. I wanted to see what his career interception percentage and quarterback sack percentage were. He has had some rough games this year when it comes to turnovers, but he has multiple touchdowns in every game except the opener this season. So that's pretty impressive. That's pretty hard to do. And it's not all just been passing touchdowns. He has rushing touchdowns in 12 of the 16 games that he's played so far, including 8 in the last 5. So that means he has had 2 or 3 games in that last 5 of 2 rushing touchdowns, including last week. Now, last week he was his first week without throwing for a touchdown. That was that game against New England, but he did run 2 of them in. I think he is going to be everybody's favorite captain. There's no surprise there, but you have pointed out that there is some downside for him. He has that boom bust sort of capability. He could be a friend to the defense and still put up a slate smashing score, Greg, though. That is the magical ability there of Josh Allen.
Yeah, and looking at our DraftKings lineups here, I mean, it's very close between the two of them. We've got 60% exposure to Josh Allen in the flex spot on DK. We got to 58% of Tua. So clearly these are 2 of the top options in the game. We're getting to a little bit more of Josh Allen in the flex spot here. Let's see about the captain ownership on DK. Captain, we have more of Josh Allen. So 13% of lineups with Josh Allen in the captain spot, whereas Tua in only 5% of lineups in the captain. So our data does indicate there's more upside in the Josh Allen side of things. And if you remember, our top overall FanDuel lineup also did have Josh Allen the MVP. So is it safe to say, EMac, that you do prefer, if you're playing one of these guys in the multiplier spot, whether it be FanDuel or DraftKings, that you'd also fall in line with that and say Josh Allen's still the guy?
Absolutely. And I think no great shakes here. 15 of 16 games, he's had multiple touchdowns. He's a good bet for a multiple touchdown game tonight. It just works out great on both of the multipliers, even paying that extra 0.5 tax on his salary for DraftKings, still worth it. I think he's your cash game your cash game MVP. There is an argument for Tyreek Hill to be there, but I would probably lean towards Josh Allen. And Team Free Money has just posted a bunch of head-to-heads, $1 in the DK lobby there, username EMac. I went 1-19 last night, Craig. That's what we call not very good. So Team Free Money was giving back to the community last night. Perhaps I will give back again tonight, but let's have some fun with that. And you said who will play both defenses? Sotex, as I like to call him, so toxic. Right. He likes to do the double defense lineups.
Our data has been fairly high on defenses relative to the field on a lot of these, like showdown single game slates this year, which, at times I look at it and you don't feel all that comfortable with it. But in hindsight, how often have defenses been in winning lineups this year, EMac, relative to what their ownership has been? Now, this is me going off memory. I don't have the data in front of me, but it does seem like there's been quite a few low scoring games where defenses have done well in primetime slates. Does it not feel the same to you this season?
It does, but defenses on the whole have been better this year. We've seen scoring down across the board. We've seen some ridiculous stuff at the beginning of the years with the rate unders we're hitting. It seems that home field advantage is not really that big of a deal, save for a couple of places, Miami being one of them during the afternoons. We talked about that. A couple stadiums have some noise, but things have kind of normalized a lot, or equalized a lot this year. But I think only, if I remember correctly, there's just one or maybe zero quarterbacks throwing for more than 300 yards per game. It's just the way the defenses have changed things. They're not giving up those regularly like they were 2 and 3 years ago, giving up the -4 on their for points allowed, or -3 for points allowed, depending on your site. They're doing just enough to kind of keep that neutral, and then picking up enough sacks and turnovers to actually be somewhat of a difference maker this year compared to their historical past. And Greg, you said you're going by your memory. You have one of the best memories I've seen amongst anybody that I get to see demonstrate regularly. You remember some of the most unique situations, not like Ben, who knows all the capitals and all the mascots and all that stuff. You will say, "Oh, 4 weeks ago we did a show EMac together. This particular thing happened." It's pretty impressive. So.
Yeah, it's mostly I find that drugs really help my memory, which I'm not even joking with you either. This is very bro science type stuff, but my experience is that weed does help my memory quite a bit. Maybe not the same for everybody. Certainly not the same for everybody, but for me it does.
Good. Well, we'll keep up the good work, I believe is what I should be saying right now. As I'm drinking a coffee to try to stay focused and awake. Perhaps I should have tried a little wacky tobacco, or as Josh likes to call it, the devil's lettuce. It's been a long time since I did that. I see my grandson's in chat. I better be on the straight and narrow. Hey, Nick, what's up?
Who's your grandson?
Notorious.
Oh, Nick Lepre. If you guys, by the way, Nick Lepre, if you guys haven't checked out the Notorious YouTube channel, Lepre's been killing it over there lately. I've been seeing the Twitter posts. He's up to, I don't even know, like every time I look, he's got like a new 10,000 followers that he's tweeting about. So if you guys haven't checked out Lepre's YouTube channel, go check that out for sure. But let's also talk about some of the running backs, because we do have the situation that you mentioned at the top. Latavius Murray, he is going to be inactive today. Leonard Fournette is in. This is going to be more pertinent to DraftKings than it is to FanDuel, because Leonard Fournette is the flat min. He's only $200 on DraftKings. I see people talking about him in the YouTube chat. And if I look at the lineups that I've built here on DK, I do have a decent amount of exposure in my lineups here, EMac. I've got 18.7% on Leonard Fournette. We've got him projected for sub 10% ownership. I know that this isn't normally where we would start the running back conversation, but because people are talking about it in the YouTube chat, is this somebody we should be considering as a punt play, EMac?
I think the question is absolutely. So the interesting thing with the Bills backfield is that while the production and opportunities, touches, carries have been going with James Cook, it has not been the snap share. He's barely crusted over 60% most games for his snap share. And we've seen Latavius Murray, obviously he's inactive tonight, but he has been the one that's kind of been there. I guess they're giving him the weekend off before he turns 34 in about 10 days. So that he must be getting the night off because of that. But the interesting thing that is happening is Cook is getting the touches, but not all the snaps. Now, we know Leonard Fournette has been around with a lot of teams. He sat on the sidelines for a long time this season. I would expect him to get 2 or 3 touches tonight. But we want to remember he has been active on and off for the last month. He has played in 1 game. He had, I didn't break it down because I combined him with Ty Johnson for this particular analysis. But Ty Johnson and Fournette have had 43 combined snaps over the last 3 games. So that leaves about 10 each, and then 10 for those two. But Murray had 40 snaps in those 3 games. So basically we have 80 divided by 3. So what, about 27 snaps that are available for theoretically for Ty Johnson and for Leonard Fournette tonight. But the rest are going to go to Cook. Now the touches, 80-90% of them have been going to Cook. The interesting thing with Cook, he has scored 2 rushing touchdowns, but he has 4 receiving touchdowns. Murray had a couple of rushing touchdowns, but only one, I believe, in the last 5 weeks. Most of his came in the first 7 or 8 games of the season, and he had 4. Of course, when you have Josh Allen getting 16 touchdowns or whatever his rushing touchdown total is at this point, it's kind of hard to break through and get those red zone touches. The good thing about James Cook, he does have 9 plays of 20 or more yards. That includes receptions as well as his carries. That, I think, it's either the second or third most on the team. It's about as many as Stephon Diggs. Mm-hmm. So he is really moving the ball between the 20s is another way to say this. But he loses out on the leverage touches to either the passing game or to Allen. But he has been doing okay in full PPR. So it's kind of interesting. So I definitely would play Fournette. I think he's perfectly fine in your cash game lineups on DraftKings. But it wouldn't shock me if it's 2 or 3 touches total. And I think that's what we need to understand with this. And we've seen a lot of $200 and $300 players that we project for 1 or 2 touches, right? This is just going to get everybody's attention. So he'll probably be a little more popular than he ought to be, but I think it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, and people in the chat are asking about Ty Johnson as well. And let's see. So if I filter and look for Ty Johnson, what is the exposure we're getting to him in here? And not that much. Not that we're getting to like a mass amount of Leonard Fournette either. He was in just under 20% of our top DK lineups here, but only 3% of Ty Johnson. And we have fairly equal workload projected between Ty Johnson and Leonard Fournette. The difference, though, is that Leonard Fournette is cheaper. So that's where he becomes a little bit better of an option, at least in our data. And, something you had mentioned there, EMac, is that, it's not somebody that we're expecting to get a mass amount of workload or anything like that. But how often do we see a min-price salary player in some of these DraftKings large field single game showdown contests? They might score only 4 or 5 fantasy points on certain days. That is enough for somebody to end up landing in a winning lineup, simply because if the studs go off in a game, and there are studs to play in this game, right? We've got Tua, we've got Josh Allen, we've got Tyreek Hill. If all of them have big games, we're going to need salary savings somewhere. And that's where Leonard Fournette, even if he only puts up 3 or 4 fantasy points, could end up being in a winning lineup. So I'm with you. I think that Leonard Fournette, especially because he's projected for sub 10% ownership here in the contest generator, somebody that we want to be getting to as a punt play on DraftKings. So I was playing one lineup. Would Fournette be in it? No, probably not. But if you guys are playing like 5 lineups, I think Fournette should be in at least one of them. And that's the way I'm looking at it. Like he's like a 20% guy. Now, people are also asking about James Cook. And I know that you mentioned him a little bit there, EMac, but the question was still geared more towards Leonard Fournette. James Cook, he's somebody, if we look in these DraftKings lineups, he's showing up in about half of them, 46% ownership. So a core part of our lineups, to be sure. As far as the running backs go on the Bills side of the game, do you feel good with paying up for James Cook in lineups?
I would rather have him in the flex. He just has 6 touchdowns on the season. I just don't want to go there. I think he is the 6th most likely player to get multiple touchdowns tonight. And he is probably the 9th most likely player to even score a touchdown tonight.
Yeah, if we go ahead and look at the FanDuel exposures that we have here, we actually are fairly overweight to James Cook in the MVP spot, where he's only projected for 6% ownership, getting to him in 12% of top lineups. And then in the flex spot, we're also overweight to him. So James Cook looking like a priority play over on FanDuel. And something else to consider as well when it comes to James Cook, other than just the relatively low ownership for him on FanDuel, is that he has had much bigger workloads in the second half of the season than he had in the first half of the year. But let's transition now to talking about the Dolphins running backs, and we have no Raheem Mostert again today, EMac. So the question here becomes, is HM the only running back you're looking to target out of the Dolphins backfield, or is there somebody else that you're also looking to maybe get exposure to?
So until we got Fournette, I was planning on playing Jeff Wilson Jr. in my cash game lineup. We don't need to now. You can, and I was playing around with those builds. It was like 52-48 going with Jeff Wilson or Cedric Wilson Jr. In that, even though Cedric is obviously a receiver, but they're similarly priced. So last week, Jeff Wilson Jr. basically stepped into the Mostert role from a snap count perspective and got kind of the I don't want to say the wasted touches because he's a fully capable back. Last year he had 1,100 combined yards for this team. I mean, the team likes him; they've kept him around. He can compete in the running and passing game. He's just every year he gets a little older and he seems to be hurt a little more. But he's still okay. So he's a decent option tonight. And we didn't see Achan's work. We didn't see his workload or snap share increase as much as a lot of people probably thought, oh, he's going to consolidate everything. But all the important touches, the schemed plays, all of that are still going to go Achan's way. Wilson is just going to be there to pick up, 6 to 8 carries and probably 2 or 3 targets. I think that's pretty close to what he had last week, but that's kind of his baseline. But I do think he's possible, and probably if I was not playing Fournette in my cash game, I would play Wilson Jr.
And if we go ahead and look at some of our exposures, not really getting to very much of Jeff Wilson Jr., actually a fairly underweight to him, both DraftKings and FanDuel in the Sims. We've got Jeff Wilson showing up in just 7% of DK lineups. Then FanDuel, if I remember correctly, was like 3% when I was just highlighting him on the FanDuel side of things. But where we do really have to look for sure a little bit deeper here, EMac, is going to be with Achan, who's just been ridiculously efficient when he's been on the field this year. And we've seen some of these games where as a chalk option, there's been times where he's gotten like 10 carries and then end up going for like 120 yards and multiple touchdowns on those 10 touches. But it does seem like they've been a little bit more willing to give him more work down the tail end of the season here, especially as he's gotten more far removed from that knee injury, which held him out for a few weeks. So as far as a priority, is Achan somebody you're going to be prioritizing relative to where the field is going to be playing him? We've got Achan right now in here for like just under 50% ownership in the flex on DK, and actually projected for 16% captain ownership. He's going to be quite popular on DraftKings, EMac.
So that is more popular than I was expecting. That'll probably be about that was where I was mentally envisioning him being for my lineups. So I guess I will be matching the field. When you started asking the question, my answer would have been, I think I'll be above, but that's not going to be the case. And a lot of it is when you have as many discounted options as we can, you really can get to those top tier guys, right? So that's what's sort of pushing things, which in turn means kind of the people in the middle maybe getting overlooked somewhat, Greg. So,
and let's see.
But I'm a chalk donkey. We know that. So.
See if any questions ended up coming into the Discord channel for us. And we do. We had Einstein ask us about where we think about Leonard Fournette. Yeah, not like a core guy, but definitely somebody who both EMac and I have said that he's worth being in lineups. And I do think he's somebody to be overweight too, considering he's projected for fairly modest ownership. If you're playing anybody, and tell me if you agree with this, EMac, if you're playing anybody for $200 on DraftKings, Fournette is the choice, right? Is there anybody you would prefer at the $200 mark other than Fournette?
Let me quickly get back to that. I don't think there was. There were a couple people worth mentioning, but so Reggie Gilliam is a no. Quentin Morris is a no. Julian Hill, a tiniest bit of interest in that, but you got to remember you're hoping for a target and he catches it, and he might get 10 yards. So Alec Ingold in a similar spot. He has just 2 carries this season. They both came in back in week 3 in that 70-20 game. Remember that one against Denver? So what? Miami has scored 70 this season and they've allowed 56. That's one heck of a spread there for the season. But he was on the short list. But now Achan totally surpasses both of them. You have Robbie Chosen, formerly Robbie Anderson, or maybe it's Chosen Anderson. There seems to be some discrepancy across is Chosen the first name or is it the last name? But he gets a brief mention, but that's really a no. Chase Claypool, really a no. Those guys each had 1 target last week. And then River Craycraft, he was more of a maybe. But I would say Leonard, I feel pretty good that Leonard's going to get 3 touches. I would guess 2 carries on a target. The other guys, you're all hoping they get a target, and maybe 2, but their red zone equity is just bupkis. I don't think Fournette's is that great, but what happens if something were to happen to Cook? All of a sudden now he's got the workload. Anything happens to these other guys. I mean, it took 2 major injuries to get all these other guys even on the board for Miami. So it's one of those where Fournette is better, but I won't say we should be doing cartwheels if he gets more than 6 full PPR points. That's the expectation you need, and I think 2 is a baseline for Fournette.
And
it's what he allows you to do with the other stuff.
Yeah, let me talk more about some of those wide receiver values in a little bit here after we answer a couple more of these questions. Because
let me talk. I've seen Ty Johnson just real quick with Ty Johnson. I think he gets more touches than Leonard Fournette. Full stop. I think he's going to get 4 or so touches, maybe 5. Most of them will be carries. But if you go look at the last few weeks, with the exception of last week when he didn't get any, and that was the week Fournette was active. Or Fournette at least set foot on the field in week 16. Otherwise, Ty Johnson has at least gotten 5 to 7 opportunities in carries in most games, along with at least 0 to 3 targets. So I really think that's the production people I think are pushing onto Fournette. I don't think he's going to get it. And if Cook goes down, it's not Fournette replacing him. It's now we have 2 real cheap running backs that are going to be stepping into that role. It's not a 1-for-1 correlation. But if you had the extra $800, whatever, is that math correct? Yeah, if you had the extra $1,200, I would rather play Ty Johnson.
And we've got a question in here from Michael J. Wants to know, he's considering betting Tyreek Hill. He wants to know, can we trust that both these teams are going to go out? Yeah, this is a very important game. They're playing for the AFC East crown tonight. So yeah, there's home field stakes on the line for playoff purposes. This is a very important game. So the reason this game is on Sunday Night Football, because remember the NFL with the flex rules, they could have moved any games around in the spot. The reason this is stuck as a Sunday Night Football game is because this is the highest stakes game of the entire weekend. So, well, maybe not. I think you could consider the Saturday night game, which was, for a winner makes the playoffs, loser doesn't. So that was pretty high stakes as well. But this game has a lot of implications, and it's also 2 very good teams. So, yeah, if you are considering betting on any of the players in here, don't let motivation be anything that deters you from this spot, because this game is very important to both teams for sure. And then Einstein wants to know, are we taking shots on Robbie Chosen tonight? So let's start talking about some of the wide receivers here now, EMac and Robbie Chosen. As you mentioned, formerly Robbie Anderson, who is showing up in a sub 1% of the top FanDuel lineups that I've built here. And then I'll pull him up for DraftKings after this, see where he was showing up in DraftKings lineups. Are you taking shots on Robbie Chosen? Typically the players, once they change their name, I don't think anything comes good from changing your name, EMac. Do you know why I feel that way? Because this isn't something you do when everything's going well.
He hurt me. Oh, he hate me.
Yeah.
He hate me. That was the only name change
Smart
that made a difference. Rod Smart, I don't know how many people remember that, but he changed his XFL, the first iteration of the XFL. He changed his jersey to say he hate me, because he said every other player out there hates him, and that's his motivation. And then the next week or 2 weeks later, one of the opposing team, they had somebody that one of them changed their jersey to I hate he and we hate he. So that was a long time ago, Greg. I think that was that before 2000? That was a long time ago.
It was,
but in any event,
because that was when.
In any event, I'm capping everybody at 10%. That's Craycraft, Sherfield, Hardy, Robbie Chosen, Anderson, Claypool. I don't think I will get very much. We're projecting all of them for 6% or less. I just leave the flexibility there. If something pops in there, then they'll be in my lineups. I'm not expecting it. Braxton Berrios is worth mentioning. He kind of plays on about a third of the snaps. He also returns punts and kickoffs. So that is important. Neither of these teams has really allowed that many kick returns. We've seen the way they changed the kickoff rules. Kick returns are down this year. There are some teams that strategize and try to kick it inside the 5, but not get a touchback. But these teams, these kickers and the teams, I think have each allowed somewhere around 25 kick returns this season. So that's like 1.5 per game. But it's always worth noting if someone gets that extra opportunity. But that's for Berrios. I think if you look moving up the pricing list, I think Khalil Shakir and Gabe Davis kind of impact each other a little bit from an opportunity standpoint. I think Kincaid impacts Khalil Shakir from where he works on the field perspective. And we've seen when Kincaid was out, you got better numbers from Shakir. When Kincaid is back now, he tends to get worse numbers. Obviously, they don't play the same position, but they operate in similar areas. So it's usually just one of them in the particular package. So I didn't set any rules to limit any of these guys, but it's just worth noting. I think Cedric Wilson is a solid option. He is in my cash game lineup. And then Tyreek Hill, obviously he made the Pro Bowl again, even though they're not playing it, they still call it the Pro Bowl. He's leading the league in yardage and receptions, both career highs for himself as well. It's quite interesting. The shocking one was Stephon Diggs. So 2020, remember, he led the league in targets, receptions, yards, everything. This year, he's kind of top 10 in targets, receptions, first downs. He only has 9 plays of 20 or more yards. Shakir and Davis have about that. And I mentioned already, James Cook has about that. That's crazy to me. Now, can he do it in any given game? Yeah, absolutely. And we saw him get, I forget what it was, but in his season when he led the league in yardage just a couple years ago, I think he had like 25 or 30 big plays, as they call them in the stat page. But that was surprising that it was down more. But the targets have definitely been there. So.
One thing I'm a little surprised by, speaking of Stephon Diggs, and I just pulled them on screen here as far as the DraftKings exposures that I'm getting to here, and it's that he's not all that popular relative to a showdown slate anyway, because Stephon Diggs, a lot of times the stud type players in showdowns, we see them being massively popular, but with all the other pay up options, we have Tua, we've got Josh Allen, we've got Achane. What ends up happening is Stephon Diggs is lower owned than all of these guys. We've got Diggs projected here in the contest generate 32% ownership in the flex spot, 7.7% in the captain spot. So I'm getting overweight to him in both those positions, both the flex and the captain. So everything you said there is noted for sure, EMac. But it kind of seems like the field, not totally writing him off or anything, but he's maybe being a little bit underrepresented in favor of some of the other studs, which I don't think should be the case. So looking at the lineups that I've built here, I do think that Diggs at a similar price point is a little bit better of a play than Achane when we do consider the ownership, with Achane being quite a bit more popular. So Stephon Diggs, definitely somebody who I think does make sense to be paying up for on this slate. And then let me see if we had any other questions in the Discord. Yes, we had one from Kevin Cash App. And don't forget, guys, if you want access to our Discord, as well as the Sims, which I have on screen, they've been really useful for me for everything, but especially for showdowns where it's going to take stuff like dupes into account, which is kind of hard to do if you're only looking at, projections and ownership. This is going to weigh your lineups based on stuff like dupes, and it's going to tell you how often those lineups are going to be duped, how it's going to impact how profitable they're expected to be. But Kevin Cash App here, in our Discord channel, if you guys want to sign up for any of those packages, by the way, use one of the links that we have below. You could sign up for our NFL data package and get access to Sims, or you can just sign up for our lineup generator package and get lineups for less than $15. But Kevin Cash App is asking us, Knox or Tyler Johnson with Josh Allen in the flex. He's also said that he's fading Diggs. So EMac, would you rather play Dawson Knox or Johnson tonight? Ty Johnson.
So hopefully my grandson doesn't hear this because we had a lot of fun recommending Knox as an amazing island game, primetime game player. He had that magical season and a half run of just getting all the touchdowns. That's not the case anymore. I think it's like 9 weeks since his last red zone target. Kincaid plays a different position. He plays more that slot standing tight end position. So it's not a big loss, but he's lost all of his red zone upside. And it's not like Allen doesn't like throwing to the tight ends in the red zone, because that's something he has done just constantly throughout his career. But this year, it's just everybody's healthy. It's rather crowded. I'm not seeing it. That $2,000 price tag. I did make a comment in the free article that I spent 3 hours writing here. I said Dawson Knox was a primetime stalwart each of the last 2 seasons, but with Kincaid being drafted, along with Davis and Shakir continuing to develop, he has fallen well down the pecking order. Knox has just 5 targets over the last 4 games. His last red zone look was in week 7. While the salary is enticing, it is important to understand the underlying lack of production before thinking this is a complete steal. So that was my assessment there, because I thought, here's a cash game. Look, we made money on Knox. This is going to be great. $2,000. They've screwed up. And then you look at that production like, ooh, am I screwing up by putting him in my lineup? That's the screw up. So be careful. Everybody's in play. He has a history of getting touchdowns, but the roles, the offense, things have changed, and that's something to be cognizant of.
Yeah, and I see people asking about captains and MVPs. And over on FanDuel, we were getting to a ton of Josh Allen at MVP. But since we are also talking about the wide receivers right here, Tyreek Hill is in nearly everything that we have for DraftKings purposes. See the lineups that have built out here. I mean, 85% of lineups just about have Tyreek Hill. He's in nearly half of my top lineups as a captain option. So Tyreek Hill, massive ceiling. We got a huge fantasy projection on him as well. He's projected for 24.35 fantasy points. Off the top of my head, EMac, I think the only player all year we've had projected better than Tyreek Hill this week, I think, is Christian McCaffrey last week. Other than that, I mean, this is a game that's supposed to be relatively high scoring. Jalen Waddle's out, which could create extra targets going to Tyreek Hill, showing up in a ton of lineups here. If you can only pay up for one guy on this slate as a skill position player, it's pretty easily Tyreek Hill for me. He's going to be chalky. I think it's worthwhile, though. Do you think Tyreek Hill is a good piece of chalk tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. Career high 1,700 yards receiving, leads the league with 114 yards per game. 29 years old, but he's made his 8th Pro Bowl this season. He has been an All-Pro basically every other year. I expect him to be All-Pro again this year. That means he's one of the 2 best receivers, or maybe they do 3 now because they don't do 2 tight ends. But that is a lofty honor. I think he's going to get it again. He's phenomenal. Last week, here's my assessment here because I know we have 9 minutes left. But last week when Waddle was out, basically the snaps kind of went, they were dispersed to a lot of players. Cedric Wilson ended up getting more snaps and his targets remained about the same. Chase Claypool, Robbie Chosen, and River Craycraft each got between 10 and 15 snaps. So a lot of the snaps went to them, but they each basically had 1 target in that game. Berrios remained mostly unchanged. He had very similar snap share, route participation, and targets. So I think Wilson is the one who benefits with a Waddle out, but it's not necessarily a direct correlation for that. But otherwise, Tyreek Hill dominates the entire team. I mean, even with Waddle there and being so good and this being like a two option offense, Hill still dominated the lion's share on this team.
If you're punting with anybody, either team, Bills or Dolphins, you have to pick one wide receiver to play for cheap. And cheap could mean whatever you want. EMac, it could mean what you used to charge for hand jobs under the bridge many years ago, which, really started to get EMac on the straight and narrow. And now look at how far he's come. It's, play on.
I don't know. Sometimes a little curve to it sometimes.
Yeah, hey, so you could take cheap to mean whatever you want, right? There's cheap is different for everybody. But if you could pick one cheap wide receiver to play today, one cheap pass catcher, who is it that you would pick amongst all the options we have in this game? Obviously, a lot of value available on the Miami side.
Yeah. So Cedric Wilson is your best point per dollar option or best point per dollar ratio, I think, amongst them. Berrios would probably be second, but I would actually go with River Craycraft if we're really scraping the bottom of the barrel. The team likes him. He's been around a bit. He's been injured a lot. So I remember I don't even think he was drafted. He came out of Washington State University in that air raid offense way back in the day. Hell, it might have even been when Gardner Minshew was the quarterback there. But he is the guy I like if I'm going super cheap and a little off the board. But Cedric Wilson isn't my cash game lineup. So, I mean, he's the cheap guy that I like.
Yeah, and Todd Lloyd is asking about your past in the chat. Don't knock the hustle. Everybody's got to make their ends meet. Everybody's got bills to pay. And
he says, I knew I recognized you.
Different people accomplish it in different ways. And I know EMac's got a little bit of hustle to him. And it's good. Every once in a while, we go out to lunch and he buys me a cheese sandwich, which he wouldn't be able to do if it wasn't for his checkered past. Let's go ahead and look at some of the captains here, because I know that's always something that's on people's minds. And let's look at DraftKings first. And if you guys haven't done it yet, do us a favor, like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel if I selected position correctly here. So we got, first, I've got all of our captain ownership up here across the lineups that I have built for DraftKings, and it's very much dominated by Tyreek Hill by just a landslide, EMac. I mean, I've only got 2 players with north of 10% captain ownership across the lineups that I've built here, and one of them is Tyreek Hill, nearly 50%, then Josh Allen at 12%. If you could only roster one player to captain today, who is it that you would be picking? Are you going with Tyreek Hill, which is what I have here, or would you be looking somewhere else?
I think I'm still going to be the chalk donkey and go with Josh Allen. He just has the best opportunity of multiple touchdowns. and that includes rushing, potential for multiple rushing touchdowns, which is crazy to say. And then I made the rule to only pair him with one of his receivers because I respect his own personal touchdown equity that much. But he would be the guy I would go with. Tyreek Hill is like Tyreek Hill is definitely second. It's sort of close, but it's not a coin flip for me. For me, it's definitely Allen.
By the way, guys, don't forget, we are sponsored here by Owner's Box, and their main contest, only about 2/3 of the way full with 4 minutes left to go. So if you guys want to scoop up some overlay, go check out Owner's Box right now. If you haven't signed up, use the link that we have below because, yeah, their contest main one only about 2/3 of the way full right now. So it looks like there's going to be some overlay, and that is one of the better ways to make yourself some money and grow your bankroll. Take advantage of the overlay that we have at Owner's Box. Sign up using the link that we have below, and when you do, and you make your first deposit, you get a bonus up to $500 when you go and sign up there through our link. So for me, it's going to be Tyreek Hill if I can only play one of the expensive guys, EMac. But if you're going to be contrarian, do you have a preference for your favorite contrarian captain option today? And you could take this to be somebody who's cheap. You could look at Tua if you want. He's only projected for 4% ownership here. But if you're looking to be different, which is just not Achane, not Josh Allen, not James Cook, Tyreek Hill. So amongst the other guys, who's the one that you like going to put in the captain spot, maybe be a little bit different?
It would be Stephon Diggs. And this is the hard part because until I really dug in the numbers, I hadn't realized how it's not pedestrian, but how the game breaking, he's like 7 touchdowns this year, right? You would expect more than that, but just Allen has just had one of the best touchdown years for quarterbacks or for any player because he's getting all those rushing touchdowns. So I would say Diggs. I'm assuming he's probably 10% maybe by the field.
7,
is he even that high?
At least 7 running everything through the contest January. It looks like 7.
Okay, I would try to go 10 to 12 on him, and I'm up loading my lineups. I'll tell you where I am. You know what? I ended up when I ran my lineups here, I ended up almost an even split with Josh Allen and Tyreek Hill. But I will say cash wise, obviously, because I played my main lineup in a lot of the contests, 50-50s and double ups, I'll have more money riding on Josh Allen. But counting just one unique lineup and measuring it that way, it was almost a tie. Interesting. That caught me off guard.
And then if we go and look at it, we'll do the same exact exercise here for FanDuel now. And as you guys see, I've got the FanDuel pulled up on the screen here. So these are the top 150 FanDuel lineups that I've built by Simulated ROI, favorited these ones. And ownership looks a little bit different for me over on FanDuel, where it's not quite as dominated by Tyreek Hill, which is just the fallout of there not being the full PPR point bonus. So there, I've got a little bit more Josh Allen in the MVP spot than Tyreek Hill. So if I was only playing one player, it would be Josh Allen. Now, with that said, Josh Allen is projected for 37% MVP ownership on FanDuel, whereas 23% for Tyreek Hill. So you're getting a little bit of an ownership discount on Hill. Well, I do think that Josh Allen is your chalk cash option for MVP. So Allen only looks better on FanDuel than he does on DraftKings, EMac, but with him projected for 37% ownership in the MVP spot here, is that too high for you, or are you still okay with him given that ownership?
I'm still okay with it. You do have to remember to gain differentiation elsewhere when you have someone that's that popular and it's the Stars and Scrubs Bills that it's allowing you to do it. That's where you don't have to make a rule, but if you all of a sudden put in one cheap person, or it was, I think my cash game lineup I think is like leaving $1,100 on the table. That normally wouldn't happen, but all of a sudden I've got Fournette, and just the way it worked, it didn't. I couldn't spend it, and I tried to move it a few different ways and didn't like it. So that's just an interesting way to do it. So if you're forcing in these kinds of things, 49,000 on DK, 59,000 on FanDuel, you're going to get a lot of dupes just because of the way that the slate is tonight. And I'm someone who likes to set that minimum floor to push it up. I relaxed it tonight just because I wanted there's enough cheap players that are getting on the field that leaving $4,000 on DraftKings is not a problem.
Yeah, so as you guys can see here, these are all the lineups I built for FanDuel. We're looking at DraftKings before. These are the projected ownerships for the field, as well as the exposures that I was getting to here. So if I was going to be contrarian, I'd be looking at James Cook, who's actually player of the third most MVP exposure to here on FanDuel. He's only projected for 6% ownership. So I think it's a pretty decent way to differentiate. And we have seen a lot more workload going to James Cook as of late. So guys, thank you very much for watching. And we are approaching the Sunday Night Football game. It's going to be a good one. If you guys haven't done it, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. But really quick before we leave, EMac, who wins tonight? Who are you picking?
I am going with the Buffalo Bills.
Oh, the Bills. I'm going to go with the Dolphins. I think they finally beat a winning team to finish out the season. And if Nick Lepre is still watching, I've done this not just for you, but because I actually think that they are going to end up winning the game today. So guys, thank you very much for watching yet again. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Good luck with all your contests tonight. And tomorrow, we'll be back here on the YouTube channel. So doing some NBA analysis tomorrow. So hope to see you guys then. Peace out. Have a great night.